Welcome back to Satisfactory, and last time we did a lot of preparations that will eventually allow us to start building our mega factory. We established our first fuel generators, which hopefully will take care of our power management issues, and established our fuel packaging plant, which makes the packaged fuel, which then goes into a train station and is eventually transported back to our mega factory. And with the packaged fuel, we were able to make our jetpack, which meant exploring was a lot easier, and we were able to find a lot more hard drives for some new blueprints. And also thanks to our new jetpack, we were finally able to come across our raw quartz, and were able to start going down the quartz tech tree. And during the off time, I created some more train stations around the place, which brings even more components back to our main factory, so I actually think we're in good stead now to finally start constructing our mega factory. And I have a rough design in mind of what I would like the factory to end up looking like, which will incorporate the space elevator inside it. So without further ado, let's get started. Which we will do by first establishing some foundation. And I'm really wanting to clear as much of the sand dunes as I can, so we're going to start making this foundation rather high. But just tall enough that we can still have our logistics feed underneath. Well, I think that looks plenty high, and this looks not too bad a starting platform. So I'm just very quickly going to store everything on my person in that chest, and then we're going to disassemble our space elevator if I could reach it. And then reconstruct the space elevator somewhere up here. Right, I think that's going to be as good as placement as I'm going to get this, just so long as we have kind of equal spacing on all sides, which so far we do seem to have. Perfect. So the overall idea is to have the space elevator here as the main focal point of the factory, so it will sit right inside the centre, and we will then build the many sub-factories all around it. I also increased the height of our foundations there, just so that they can accommodate refineries being placed underneath it, with the idea of our raw components coming in and then being fed directly into a refinery setup below, which would then turn them into ingots, which we could then take further up into the factory to go into some other smaller sub-factories. But I also want to have a big clearance from the space elevator, so what I'm going to do just now is just find a boundary of it, and we'll maybe come 1 or 2 foundation blocks away from it, and that's pretty much going to be enough clearance, I think, to allow us to build around it, but still have logistics go into it. And I think we will donate a radius around us of where we can build and where we can't. So we'll just colour the foundation around it in red where we can't build. Okay, that's not looking too bad so far. Although, just out of curiosity, can I have this conveyor belt go through the space elevator? Well, the answer may be yes, just unfortunately the conveyor belt is too long and I can't put any more foundation closer to it. So, could be an interesting idea if I could pass things through the kind of boundaries here. Well, moving on, I think I'm going to place some frame windows around this as well, just again to act as a boundary so that I don't build inside it, but also maybe add a little bit more kind of decor, I suppose, to the space elevator itself. And I'm going to need to think about transportation as well, as this factory is going to be more vertical than horizontal, I believe. So maybe having a couple of squares here, a couple of foundations free for me to either put stairs or hypertubes or some form of way for me to go up into the factory might not be a bad call here either. And I'm thinking maybe just 3 foundation squares actually. So let's colour them in not red but the yellow that I thought I had selected. That's better, and this will denote that I can build within this area here, but this will be for my own transportation, which really then leaves a lot of room for these other sub-factories that we can build. So basically, anything within this kind of big square here to begin with is a no-go or an okay transportation go. The rest will be for our factories. So I'm now just going to go around the perimeter and fill out the rest of the foundations here. And to be fair, a lot of what I'm doing right now will probably change in the future, but at least for now, we'll just try and get some foundations for the mega factory placed down. And so far, so good. If I had some more colour cartridges, I would finish doing the foundations here, but this is looking okay so far. We're definitely making a start. What I'm probably going to do as well is have almost like a cavity wall. So if I take out this foundation here and then just put some windows at either side just as kind of walls, what I could possibly do further down in the side the factory is have conveyor belts come up and just go up through this little part, but I'll never be able to see it because it's kind of hidden off. And then we can have those conveyor belts go up to further sub-factories within it as well. Just trying to keep everything tidy and out of the way so that we don't have a massive belts everywhere. Well then, Let's do a bit of testing with some refineries, making some ingots for us, and just seeing how we could possibly take them up into the factory. So with the new alternative recipe for pure iron ingots, we can actually make 65 iron ingots every minute from 35 iron ore and 20 cubic meters of water. Our current Mark IV logistics allows us to transport up to 480 items every minute. So if we took that 480 and divided it by the 35 iron ore here, we get out 13.7 something, which admittedly is a rather horrible number, but it would be pretty much 14 refineries that we could then have up here, with maybe just one of them underclocked, just to kind of keep the numbers balanced. But in essence then, if we did take the 14 refineries and multiply it by the 65 iron ingots per minute, we would get out roughly 900 iron ingots every minute. So that would be roughly 900 iron ingots out from just one line of iron ore. And for comparison, we do have 12 foundries here at the moment, which are all producing 50 iron ingots each, meaning that we get out 600 iron ingots just from this setup alone. So we could have 14 refineries giving us out 900, which is a significant increase from the foundries. Although I will need to take the water into account here as well, which we will require 20 cubic meters per refinery, so 20 times 14 is going to give us 280, which we can definitely get from one water extractor, so that's not really much of an issue actually. So the next step of the plan is to make one set of refineries here, from one set of iron ore coming in, and then seeing how we can manage it, pulling it up through the factory. So that's the refineries now set up here, and I have done something a little bit different which I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. Whenever I do any builds, I always try have things balanced so that any line that comes in is equally split amongst all the machines that it's trying to feed. But with this setup here, and indeed probably for any setup going forward, what I've done is just have one continuous line that splits its way down eventually to the final machine. So I do have the 14 refineries set up here, and they are kind of set up in series with each other. And what will happen is we will have our water and our iron ore come into this first refinery here. It will be filled up, and then it will move on to the next one, which will fill up the second one, and then that will go on to the third one, which will fill it up, and then go to the next one and the next one and the next one, just until it finally comes around the corner here and eventually will reach this last refinery, which we have underclocked just so that we get this 71% out of it. But I am aware that all of our resources coming in will be split in half whenever they meet the first splitter, and then split again once they meet the second one, etc, as we continue down the line. But I am hoping that won't make a difference once each of the refineries finally fills themselves up. So yes, I'm aware that these refineries won't get enough resources at the beginning, so there's going to be a lot of stop start, but once they are filled up, it will just be a simple case of maintaining them with any of the spare resources that we have available. That is the theory that I'm going to run with just now. We will see what actually happens whenever I turn these machines on, but I'm actually quite happy with this setup here. And as you can probably already tell, there is going to be quite a lot of jump cut forwards just as I spend some time building and refining some things. Which, as you can see here, I now have a second set of refineries set up and have changed the layout of the original one. And all I've really done is spread things a lot more horizontally here. We still have the 4 refineries set up, with the very last one underclocked to 71%, but everything else remains the same. All I'm really trying to do with these builds here is just try and save on some of the real estate as much as I can, so just trying to get things a bit more compact as well is going to be an added bonus here. Especially whenever I am going to have a lot of duplicate setups here of other buildings that I'm trying to make components from, such as this other refinery setup. But we now have 2 refinery setups here, both doing the exact same thing and both going to roughly output me 900 iron ingots every minute each. And we do have a lot of iron ore miners around the place, so as long as I can get out at least 480 ore per minute from each of them, I can have a pretty limitless amount of these refinery setups making iron ingots for us, with maybe the only added factor here being a power cost, seeing as this one setup is going to cost 420 megawatts in order to operate. But that's why we've brought our packaged fuel over to our main factory here, so I will be able to establish some fuel generators just to ensure that our power is going to be fine. I also did have to raise this factory's foundations again, just so that we have a lot of clearance for our refineries and our space elevator above, and we have even more of a gap now from the sand dunes below. But I did notice that we were encroaching this other factory here just as I was building out, so I actually think building a little bit higher than it might allow me to save this factory for now so that I still get components from it, while still continuing building the ones here. But this is all part of the design process. I'm pretty sure I'll rip all of this down at some point and restart again. But I'm thinking for now, I'm pretty happy with this refinery setup, so I could definitely foresee myself making more here. But before I do make any more refineries, I should probably make sure that the current setup here is actually going to work. So I'm going to need to bring some water over into this setup here. Whether I bring that packaged and then unpackage it, I'm not sure if I'll do that yet. And I also need to bring some raw iron ore over into the setup here as well. Well, ore wise, this shouldn't be much of an issue. We do have a pure iron ore miner right here. And I did see a nasty nearby that will hopefully leave me alone. And this one is actually giving us out 240 iron ore every minute, which unfortunately this is a Mark II miner, so what I'm going to need to do is just overclock it after I kill this bloody nasty. So what I'll do is I'll take this conveyor lift and bring it further down and see if we can take this 480 ore over and into it. Which here the iron ore comes out now. Another nasty, so that'll go upstairs. Now we need to just worry about the water, which looking at our map here, I'm not very close to any water source here really, so no matter what I'm going to need to drag it back. Well, I'll just use this water source over here, so I'll place down this water extractor, and then I will get just my Mark I pipelines out, and we'll just drag it straight back over to the factory this way. If it comes to it, I could upgrade these pipelines to Mark II so that I can transport some more fluid, but again this is just more of a test run for now than anything, so I'm happy just pulling this back the way I'm doing it at the moment. And I have the power shards, so I may as well just overclock this water extractor just to get the 300 cubic meters of it out. And then we can chase the pipe all the way back to the factory. Well, hopefully soon we will start seeing some water in this pipeline, but that's it now all connected up. Let's actually connect this refinery setup to the main grid. And that looks as if we've got some power into this now, so how are we looking water wise? Well, I can actually see the pipe starting to move now. I think it's just taking its time because we do have quite a distance away. But yes, we are now starting to get water in the pipes, which should eventually go into these refineries here. And I'm never quite sure of a good way how to measure how many components we are actually manufacturing, rather than just taking them all out and put them inside an awesome sink. So if I had some extra cable, I would put down some awesome sinks and we could actually see what's going to happen with this setup. Well, that's our conveyor lines now placed into our awesome sinks. How are they looking? We have 56 coupons actually, and I clearly still have some components being fed into other awesome sinks. So I'm going to need to try calculate what we've got just now in terms of points and how many we'll get out once we start putting in these iron ingots. Which the fact that we don't actually have any water in this first pipe here isn't really instilling me with much confidence that this setup's going to work. Nor does the fact that we don't actually have any water inside our first refinery here either. Although whenever I do check the pipeline here, it is actually full of water, and the one behind it, not so much. So it's actually just a head lift issue, which I should be able to sort by placing down this pipeline pump Mark II, and now that it's powered and actually functioning, I can hear water start to move, which is filling up this pipeline here actually. Okay, well that little problem has now been solved, and I can slowly start to see the little lights at the top turn green as we actually start getting the right amount of resources inside these refineries. So I think so far, so good actually. Yes, because occasionally we are actually getting out a nice little string of these iron ingots. Cool, so the first half of this now seems to be working fine. We are just waiting on the second half, which again occasionally I am starting to see a nice little string of iron ingots come out. So it's really all just a waiting game. Point wise, I'm not really sure how to calculate this. I know that iron ingots give you 2 points for every one that you sink. So if we've got roughly 900, that should be an additional 1800 points, give or take. I can't remember how many points we started with. Probably should have taken note of that. Well, I'm actually pretty happy with this setup here, with the refineries making our iron alloy ingots for us. So what I'm thinking about doing is just taking the setup of these ones here, and then maybe multiplying it a few times just down the length of the mega factory here. So we'll have quite a lot of refineries making quite a lot of iron ingots for us. And whenever I say multiply them out a few more times, I actually mean multiply them by 10-fold. So we have got 10 rows of these refineries, all making us roughly 900 iron ingots every minute, for a total of nearly 9,000 iron ingots per minute. And I've got to admit, it's actually quite an impressive sight seeing them all set up here, although I'm very aware that this is going to be hugely costly in terms of our power. But speaking of power actually, I still need to attach them all to the power grid. But I think I have an idea on how to do that. Within the MAM, inside the Caterium research tree, we actually have access to this power switch that we could get, and this will let us have all of our factories still connected up to the main power grid, but allow us to control whenever they use power from it or whenever they don't. So I'm thinking about researching this, which means first I'm going to need to get another 13 AI limiters, which shouldn't be too bad to get, and then we can start thinking about how we're going to start powering on all of these refineries. So that's us now got all of the components for this research, so we'll start it. And I think in the meantime, we should look about how we're going to take the outputs from the refinery and put them straight up into the factory. Ideally, I don't really want to build on the yellow foundations above. That's more for my own personal transport once we start building further up into the mega factory. These cavity wall ideas that I had might work here, where I could just use the outside of the foundations here and have the outputs from the refineries come up and go into them. And I'm hoping that I've designed this in a way that will let me put down a wall conveyor there, then take the output from this one here and kind of line it up, which actually I think that is looking pretty perfect. And then what we can do is just take our conveyor lift and then just have it go up through the wall this way and take it from the other side, if I could snap. And yes, we could kind of just have a mock one like that heading straight up inside the factory. Okay, that could definitely work here. Not sure how we'll do this conveyor belt though. Could have it go down, or probably just similar side there. Well, I'll worry about that later. That's our MAM research now done, so let's go look at this power switch. Which here it is, and it's going to require some quick wire, some steel beams, and one AI limiter. And until I get a factory up making these AI limiters for me, sadly I am going to need to make them by hand. But I'm wondering if I take a wall from over there and place it somewhere about here, then maybe we could attach the switch to that, and that could control these sets of refineries here. And actually, I probably don't even need a wall for this, unless we can stick it to it. Nope, okay, so this is just a standalone item, so let's get rid of that. And I will probably just set this maybe about there, so that we have this going into the back end of the refineries. And I'm assuming that we just connect this up to our other power lines, if I had one there. That's pretty much how that's going to go, and then we could just connect all of our refineries into these power lines. Okay, we could possibly do that, although I certainly won't be using the purple Mark 1s. I think instead we'll use the purple Mark 3s, which means I'm going to need to get some rubber first. And I'm pretty sure I have a train taking our plastic and rubber over here, so I'll quickly head over there and grab some of that. Soon we'll be doing all of this in-house, so I'll not need to come out here and find out whereabouts these are stored. And you can see here the kind of scale that this mega factory is going to end up being, just with all of these refineries here on the bottom floor. And I think this purple here will allow me to connect 10 things up to it, so pretty much I'm only going to need 2 of these power poles per one set of refineries here, so that'll be pretty nice. Let's try and find the middle one and place it about there. Yes, we've got 10 connections for this, and that's pretty perfect to me because we have 10 refineries set up here in total. Actually, just ignore me, we actually have 14 refineries. I've just got a setup of 10 of 14 refineries. Damn, 140 of these refineries. So we are going to need a second power pole for all of this. The setup overall is still going to cost 420 megawatts to run, which is absolutely fine. And with the power switch, I'm assuming we just turn it on and off like a fuse switch here. So that's fine, we can simply do that. So I'll take that same power setup and maybe just start putting a little line of them all the way down here for these other refineries. Well, so long as I'm able to fit in these purple Mark 3s into place, which this is definitely going to be a nice tight squeeze down here because I have built everything so close. But I believe that's all of our refineries now connected to their power poles, and then connected to these power switches, and then connected to a further power pole here as well. That will then eventually get connected to the main power grid. So I think that everything here is now all connected up properly. So that's the output for all of this now sorted. What I next need to do is sort the input, which I plan on having the materials come from this direction into the refineries this way. And that again actually might not be too difficult to do. If I could have placed that wall conveyor wall here, which is probably held up by this pipeline support. Let me try again. Actually, I think it's because of the pipe. So now if I place down this wall conveyor, yes, it was just a pipe. And in fact, if I put a wall above that, I could have our conveyor belts come from the window and just simply go into these mergers here, or these splitters, sorry, which will split them all the way down the line. And I could put this pipeline wall hole probably just about there, I think, and then attach a pipeline about there. and that's looking pretty good. So we could have a water source coming from there and then travel down this pipe, splitting amongst the refineries. So yes, I think that's all going to work. At some point I will need to figure out actually how to bring our iron ore and water over into this part, but I think for now I could maybe just kind of wall off all of these refinery areas set up here, and we could pretty much call this whole area here complete. So before we move on to actually connecting up these refineries, there's going to be another small time jump, and hopefully the next scene here will be a more completed floor for our iron ingots. And that completed floor looks something like this, which I've got to admit, I actually really like how this is looking so far here. The walls around the place actually does kind of show just how big this entire area is, even all the way just down to the bottom there. This is a huge area just for our iron ingots here, and in fact if I head upstairs, this just goes to show just how much room we now have up here to build more sub-factories on, and this is just half of what the mega factory will end up being. I took the time to basically copy this area over here just on the opposite side so that we're kind of symmetrical on either side. So again, you can just see how much space we're going to have over there for more factories and more items, because I do reckon that all of this will be more than sufficient for me to be able to place in some more buildings to help with our smelting. So I'll be able to put in some big steel plants, and I'll be able to put in copper ones, maybe caterium, and possibly aluminium here as well whenever we get up to that research. But I'm pretty happy with basically the foundations of our mega factory here so far. The only problem that I do have with all of this is that it's very dark, but I do have some ceiling lights which I have unlocked but haven't used yet, so I suppose this is as good a time as any. Actually, I'm quite spoiled for all of our lighting choice here. I wonder how big the floodlights are. The answer is quite big actually. I'm not quite sure if they even fit into this giant room here. I'm going to build one and we'll just see how this is going to look. Well, it's clipping out a little bit here on the top floor, so it's very close, that would have done, but just a bit too big for our purposes. I'll probably just stick to these ceiling lights. Let's place one there and just kind of roughly see how bright it is going to be. We actually connect the lights up to another power pole, so that would involve a lot of power lines and wires all over the place, and it's busy enough here already. I'm wondering if wall mounted lights may be better just to keep things a bit tidier. It really all depends on how bright these things are. Well, let's just actually see how bright they're going to be. That's it connected to the main power grid, and actually I really like that. I like that a lot there. A little bit better placement here, but we've almost got a spotlight for these refineries. I do quite like that. What about wall mounted ones? I'm just going to place it about there, I think. Yep, okay, and how bright are you going to be? Let's connect you up and we will see. Doesn't really reach them just as much as this other one does. Let me disconnect that quickly. I mean, it does give a little bit of light here, but certainly not as much as the ceiling lamps do, although it would certainly be a lot tidier if I could keep these power poles merged into these walls. And I've just noticed as well that we can maybe adjust the angle that these go to. Yeah, so I can make that more vertical or more horizontal should I wish here. Interesting actually. Let's see how this one looks. Well, keeping it at that angle there does illuminate quite a lot of the factory here. So I could certainly just have them running up this side there, but I'm still thinking that maybe these ceiling lights are the overall winner for these refineries. Well, here's the ceiling light at night actually, and yes, I'm going to require a lot of lighting in here because this room is stupidly dark, but I still will need to find a suitable way in order to connect them up into their power grid. So I think this is an idea that I'll leave for now then, and we'll move on to something else. Actually, just before I do move away from lighting for a second, I've just seen that I can actually connect them up in series here. So if I grab another ceiling light and just place it there, I can then take a power line out and connect it there, and we've got a kind of series connection. So it's only ever going to be one wire connected down into a power line here. Everything else here can just get connected to other lights. And I've remembered that we have this light control panel here as well, which I'm just going to place down and connect him up to this power grid too. Now, I wonder how we use this to control those. I think I need to disconnect it from there and actually connect them up to this first. Yes, and then that's connected to the main power grid there. Okay, how does this work now? So I can easily change intensity, which is making some of them brighter. In fact, is that just connected to the very first one? No, it must affect all of the lights there actually, because I just changed their colour to red and they've all changed to red. So the intensity must work the same way here. Yeah, pretty much I'm guessing. I do quite like the purple as well here. Okay, well I'm definitely going to have a bit of fun with these lights here then I reckon, but that's definitely enough about lights for now. Let's get these refineries actually connected up and get them working. So the way I've got this set up is that all of our raw resources will come from this direction into this side of the factory here. So we'll have our iron ore and we'll have our water come in, and that will feed our refineries on this side. What I'm probably going to do is set up some form of train station just where all of these other factories are here. So yes, that sadly will mean removing them eventually, but I could have a lot of train tracks come over and deliver our raw resources here, which we could then feed underneath and come into the factory at this side, or indeed the other side whenever we have it up and running. But I'm in no real rush to rip this down just yet, so for now what I'm going to do is just very messily find 10 pure iron ore nodes and see if I can pull them back and start feeding all 10 sets of these refineries here. And by the way, this is pretty much how half of the mega factory is already looking. So it's definitely going to be a bit of a beast once it's up and working, especially whenever we're going a lot more vertical with this thing rather than horizontal here. So a short time later and we end up with this absolute mess at the back here. But we now have all of our ore as well as our water being fed into the refineries. I was able to find 10 pure iron ore nodes about the place, so we should be getting in exactly 480 from each. We require roughly 280 cubic meters of water to be fed into each refinery setup here, which is why we've moved on to these Mark II pipelines, which is able to take 600 cubic meters and split it in half so that we have 300 going into each section. And we now have quite a nice array of all of these water extractors here, which are all working together to supply us the required amount of water that we need for these refineries. And on the inside, we now have quite a nice array of these awesome sinks, which will take out our iron ingots and just sink them, and that will hopefully give us a rough estimate of just how many of these ingots that we're actually able to produce. So we're nearly there with all of this now. Last thing that we need to do is get it powered on, which I've got 3 power poles here just to help us with our power management. Our first power pole shows that we require 600 megawatts, but that's actually just for our awesome sink setup here. The second power pole here is for 66 megawatts, but this is for our lighting system, which I've now got a nice setup of these ceiling lights just over our refineries. The last power pole here is actually for our refinery setups, but if I come into it, we only have a requirement of 420 megawatts, which is only one set of these refineries here, and as we have 10 of them, that's actually 10 times 420, so the requirement is 4.2 gigawatts for the refineries alone. So power wise, I need to take the sum of all 3 of the power poles here, which works out to be about 5 gigawatts of power that we're going to require in order to just set everything up here. And that's quite a lot, seeing as our current power grid is actually only producing us about 4 gigawatts of power. So that really is a substantial increase that we're going to require here. But this is why we have that train there that's bringing us our packaged fuel, because I could take the packaged fuel out from this station at a rate of 480 per minute and feed it into some form of fuel generator array. And our fuel generators can produce us 150 megawatts per generator at a rate of 12 fuel every minute. So if I need to produce 5 gigawatts of power, that's 5,000 divided by 150, which makes about 33.33. So I would need at minimum 34 of these fuel generators just to power our setup. And also because our fuel comes out in its packaged form, I would need to unpackage it first, which if I come into here, this thing will take in 60 packaged fuel every minute, and from that we would get out 60 cubic meters of fuel plus the 60 empty canisters. So basically I would need the 480 packaged fuel divided by the 60 that we require, and that would give us 8 packagers that we would need for this setup. And because our fuel generators only require 12 cubic meters of fuel per minute, and we can supply it 480 fuel every minute, we could essentially have 40 fuel generators running in a grid here, and that would certainly be enough power just to do what we're trying to do here with the refineries. So that sounds like a potential plan to me, let's make a setup here of 40 fuel generators, which will supply our mega factory with at least the power to run these refineries. At least we've got plenty of room around the place to build such a beast. Well, here's the 8 packagers that we now have set up here, and just beside them we've got these empty storage containers which will have our empty canisters go into, and just behind the packagers you can see our massive army of these fuel generators. So this is 40 fuel generators set up here in a similar fashion to our refineries, where we just have fuel come down the one line and eventually split off and feed all of them there. So yes, there's still going to be this stop start, but eventually the end ones will be fed and we will get out nearly 6 gigawatts of power from all of this. So we'll just start bringing this conveyor line of packaged fuel over to our packagers and we'll get this whole thing up and running. That's our fuel generators hooked up to the main power grid, so all I need to do is grab this conveyor belt here and feed it straight into this splitter. So our fuel should come up and be split so that half of it goes into these 4 packagers and the same on the other side, which will eventually turn it into fuel, and that should flow down there and eventually go into our fuel generators. So I know that this is going to take quite a long time for all of these to start fueling up, because we do need to feed the first one, then feed the second one, third one, blah blah blah, all the way up until the end. So it is going to be quite a long process here, but eventually we should be able to get out the 6 gigawatts that we are able to produce. I should also point out as well that the mess of conveyor belts as well as pipes here delivering our water is more of a temporary measure here, and eventually whenever I do get a proper train station up for our raw resources, this will be tidied up. Same story for our fuel generators here. This is again just more of a temporary placement for them. I will get them a better home down the line. For now, I just want to make sure what I've done here today has actually been worth it, and we will be able to produce nearly 9,000 iron ingots per minute. Well, here's another train full of our packaged fuel coming in here. I can't remember exactly how much fuel that we are producing every minute, so after that unloads here, I actually might grab the train just to head out and check that number, just to make sure that we are making at least minimum of 480 packaged fuel every minute, just to keep this setup here running constantly. Plus also, whilst I'm out here, I'm going to turn off all of the awesome sinks, just so that we don't have anything being fed into them, and I can get rough numbers as to how many iron ingots that we're actually producing. Well, unfortunately, I only have 3 packagers out here, each of them making 40 packaged fuel every minute, so that's only a total of 120, which is substantially less than the 480 that we require out there. Now I know that the train can take quite a lot of the packaged fuel every minute from here out to our mega factory, but I think this is still something that I may need to address eventually, because I'm pretty sure we will definitely run out of this fuel if we keep going at this rate. But for now, until we do find a better way to power our sources, we're just going to wing it and go with what we're making here. I do just hope that it's going to be enough to see these alloys being made though. Ideally, I wouldn't be taking packaged fuel from the oil plant there back to the mega factory. I would be taking it in its raw form of crude oil and processing it out here, because I have unlocked a few new recipes which should hopefully help us make some more packaged fuel, but that's going to need to be something that I look into another time. For now, we'll just head back to our fuel generators and see how we're looking, which the fact that I can't see the bottom generators lit up yet isn't boding well. Our power generation here is very much fluctuating at the moment, but at some points I do see 5.2 gigawatts, so we are getting there with this. It's just really taking its time. I don't really like this setup that I've got here, but it's very simple whenever we are dealing with so many different machines. But yeah, I would much prefer just to balance things. But this is just going to need to do for now. I think it's just these 2 end ones here that really aren't powered up yet. And it's no wonder that they're not, because this pipeline just beforehand has no fuel in it at all. What about the one beforehand? Very little as well. These ones must be getting filled up next. But I know once all of them are full of fuel here that they will just continuously run. It's just going to take quite some time for them to do so, and it is a bit annoying just watching them turn on and turn off. But I am tempted to take this power line over and just see if we can actually make a start at things here. They will all turn on eventually. Well, we're now pretty much consistently hitting over 5 gigawatts of power here, so let's connect this main power line up to this power pole here, and I will get the 3 remaining ones and we'll connect those up here as well. And this is our refineries. So let's see what breaks. This is probably the best time to see the lighting setup that I've made here, which, there you go. And that's a rather nice stream of these iron ingots coming into this awesome sink here. How are we looking? 640 points every minute, and they are pretty much all just coming in from the bottom half of this refinery setup here. The other half I don't really think is making much progress just yet. Well, there we go actually, that's the bottom half now starting to work. So the bottom half there is starting to go into this awesome sink here, meaning that we're now getting out 1150 points every minute. And again, every iron ingot gives us out 2 points per minute, so that's 1146 points divided by 2, which gives us out 573, which is not really the 900 that I thought we were getting out, which is probably due to the fact that some of these refineries near the end here aren't actually getting in the required amount of ore every minute. I can see once this hits 100% here, that yes, that definitely doesn't have the 7 iron ore inside it. So it's going to turn off. Again, it's probably just another waiting game with this, because yes, there's hardly any ore coming into these end ones here at all. I mean, eventually they will here, because it's now starting to flow. It really just depends on whenever these refineries here get enough intake. And I've just noticed that our other refinery setups aren't actually turned on. Do I need to do this manually? Power switch is now on, so let's turn on this set of refineries here. I need to move those power switches over. I thought that was for those ones there. This power switch here should be for those ones there, so we'll turn that on as well. And yep, that's them starting to come online. All just a teething issue this, just going around and finding out all of the problems as to why this isn't going to work the way we thought it was. And it also explains why it was only showing 420 megawatts of power required, even though we do have the 10 setups here. So if I turned on all of these switches to begin with, we would have got an accurate amount of power required. But I think this might be the last power switch. Nope, one more to go. Still, it's pretty neat that we do have the separate power switches for all of the refineries here, because it will let us turn them off and on, just as and when we need them. And boy does this please me. Look at the amount of iron ingots already coming out here. Absolutely fantastic. And we're now up to nearly 7,000 points every minute, which is still a rather small amount of points in terms of how many we should actually be getting, because at nearly 9,000 ingots being produced every minute at 2 points apiece, we should be getting out close to 18,000 points every minute. So we're what, 1/3 of the way there? But just like the power, the points are very slowly starting to climb up, so maybe eventually these will finally reach 18,000 points. But we'll see. To be honest with you, I'm just really enjoying walking down this corridor here and seeing all of these iron ingots fly by. So I've been down this line of refineries here, and I think it's this one here. Yes, you can see there's only 47 pieces of iron ore inside it, and the one beside it has 96. So we are getting very close to the end here of all of them being full of 100 each. It is climbing up, just very slowly, but once the rest of these reach roughly the same amount, then that's when we're going to be at max capacity. I'm not too worried about water here at all actually, because all of the pipes are absolutely full. So we've definitely got the fluid right. Maybe just the raw resources themselves could be a bit better. But I'm also very impatient, as you already probably know, so I really should just be waiting a bit longer here. Although we're up to 15,000 points now, so we are getting really close. And look at those ingots just absolutely fly. This is just absolute magic. 9,000 iron ingots per minute. What the hell are we going to do with this sheer amount of iron ingots? Think of all the components we're going to be able to make with them. This is going to get crazy fast, and I'm already loving it. Well, I certainly think that we've had quite a productive day today. We have established the beginnings of our mega factory, placed down the foundations, and have gotten up our refinery setup here, which is producing us nearly 9,000 iron ingots every minute, and we really do have the foundations built up here for our mega factory. There's going to be a lot more still to come whenever we're building this thing. We've really only just began with it, so as our points reach ever closer to our 18,000 goal here, I think this is maybe a good enough time for us to wrap up, because I certainly think we've done not too bad today. Certainly not too bad at all. And if you've enjoyed this episode of Satisfactory here, why not give the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. We are trying to hit 1000 subscribers on the channel here, so every sub really does help, plus it's free. But with 9000 iron ingots now being made for us every minute, we've certainly got our work cut out for us next time. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now, bye bye.